Alright, well, all the seats are full. Looks like it's about time. So, I'm Barney. I work as a systems engineer and game designer for Poptropica. My background is in computer science and sociology. So, I have a problem with this talk. It's 20 minutes long, and I have an additional 20 minutes of slides, and I have a half an hour interactive section at the end, and I don't have that many minutes to give the talk. So I'm going to give my slides and my talking portion at the same time. I'm not reading the slides, so it may be challenging to keep up with all the information. I'll try to pause for long enough. Wave your hands in the air if I'm going too fast and you need more time to read the slides. I can slow down. But I think that, for your slides? What's that? Do you have a URL for your slides? I think that they will be available through here.
They should be available following the conference.
Yeah, they'll be available through the conference website afterwards, so they have some information. So. All right, so how many people here are from an academic background? Okay, awesome. This talk may not be academic enough for you. How many of you guys here are game developers? Okay, so this talk may be too academic for you. How many people are parents? Cool. And how many people here are gamers? Awesome. All right. So let's get started then. So there are things wrong with the world. Racism, sexism, class, privilege. Those are loaded words, and ones we're hearing a lot about lately. Gamergate, anyone? Talking in those terms, though, often makes it really difficult to get past the justified anger and to a place where change is possible, either within our games and within the world that we're making them for. For this talk, I want to unload that gun and put it down, because it's hard for anyone to hear what you're saying when you're waving a gun in their face. So I'm going to talk about one of the systems that gives rise to those social issues, one that I believe is tied to the heart of games, and one that I believe we can use to affect real change. So the premise of this talk is that games are inherently engines of social capital. It's a sociological term for the resources, norms, and values that are shared by belonging to a particular social group, and to the sense of entitlement to the privileges that are granted by class membership. I'm sorry, wrong capital. So what is social capital? Here are a few definitions from prominent sociologists, and I'm going to read one and display some others, so good luck. A classical view of social capital is resources embedded in social structure, which are accessed and or mobilized through purposive actions. People can get returns from social capital by certain social actions. Instrumental activities can generate instrumental returns, like wealth, power, and reputation, while expressive activities can lead to expressive returns, like physical health, mental health, and life satisfaction. Those two were by Lynn, 1989. So, if you're wondering about the four names at the bottom, they're four of the men who are recognized as founders of sociology. And yes, that marks. They all talked about social capital in one form or other, so the idea is not new. In lay terms, though, social capital is the resources themselves, money, time, reputation, your awareness of those resources, access to those resources, either through personal connections or institutional structures, and the belief that you have the right to access them. So if all of this is a little bit dry, I can get over it in a few slides and get on to more interesting things. So you may have noticed that what I'm describing here as social capital is in fact the mechanism by which systems of equality are perpetuated. This is how the man keeps you down, whether you're an ethnic minority, a woman, religious minority, or born into a lower economic class. And that's why I had you all put down your guns a few slides ago. I didn't want to get shot 5 minutes into the talk. From a sociological perspective, though, social capital is neutral, just like money is neutral. People say money is the root of all evil, as if there was no violence or greed or hate before we invented economic systems. Social capital is just like economic capital. It's a system of exchange. Absolutely, it's used to perpetuate systems that many, I hope most of us, see as inequitable. So this talk is about using games to change the world. But it isn't about restructuring the very nature of society. I mean, maybe we need to tear down the patriarchy and go back to a hunter-gatherer society, but that's beyond the scope of this talk. So I'm going to focus on explaining how social capital works, how it applies to games, and how those things can help us make games that will make the systems that exist now work better for everyone. Because, they're what we have at the moment. So, access to social capital. In small groups, like a set of friends or a small town, social capital is earned and transferred in a really manual way. You go out, you form relationships, you do things for people because you care about them or because you live near them and interact with them every day. Later, when you need things, they're happy to provide them for you. Rather than that breaking down when you scale up the group size, systems form around the generation and transfer of that social capital. In modern post-industrial society, a vast amount of social capital is available through well-defined interfaces. So, due to the scale of our society, access to those interfaces is often, not always, and this isn't a solution for everything, but often it's only limited by an understanding of how those interfaces are accessed and a belief that we have the right to access them. So, another quote. So, games are engines of social capital. They're essential engines of its production. Like other forms of expression, games can teach systems of behavior. They can model social mores, they can establish, reinforce, or challenge existing social structures. But we as game designers, those of us who are game designers, I think it's the majority, we sometimes seem to only be sort of peripherally aware that games have that effect, when we're not outright denying that our games can have any effect on people at all. I don't think we make purposeful enough use of those things. So, social capital is most powerfully passed on from parent to child. It's also passed on through exposure to and acceptance by peer groups, by locale, and through larger societal messaging. The nature and amount of the capital that's gained in each of those ways is strongly influenced by economic class, as well as by a myriad of other factors, which confer various systemic advantages and disadvantages. Things like race, gender, class, sexual orientation. So, how do you transfer social capital? Well, there have been a lot of really academic papers that try to study this. And there have been a lot of books of less academic rigor that also try to address this issue. Games, then, are another venue for conveying models of behavior for societal expectations and structures of power. Like literature and other arts, games can also do this in a way that's essentially divorced from those more local influences from the previous slide. Which is to say, things like books and movies and plays and other media can, to a lesser degree, provide some of the benefits, i.e. social capital, of race and class and gender. And games can do that too, but games can do it interactively. And in terms of transferring social capital, that's more powerful. There we go. So, one of the purposes of games, beyond just being fun to play, is to teach non-game systems. Systems that are transferable to the real world. For example, a classic game like chess teaches strategy, and thus how to manipulate the expected patterns of behavior to your advantage. Children's games of make-believe, like playing house, or cops and robbers, or maybe even a better example, because they arise organically over and over again. And they serve as an environment to practice and explore the expectations and consequences of social action. So, No, that's a terrible play. Not bad. While games have the implicit purpose of generating social capital, there we go. I wouldn't argue that they always do it well or convey beyond simple concepts. However, I think that if we're aware of the aspects and nature of games, then we can do a lot of things to increase their effectiveness and the complexity of the social systems that they teach. Games have the potential to expand available social narratives, to teach the disenfranchised how to plug into systems of power, and to model the possibility of a more just society. I actually think those screenshots on the slide are pretty good examples. Maybe I should have chosen worse ones, but it kind of speaks to my point that games can serve to generate social capital in the same way as other forms of media and play. That's more true or more obvious in some games than others. All games teach their users, teach them something. What I'm suggesting is that we need to be more aware of what our games are teaching and be ready to shape our games and take advantage of any opportunities we see when we stop and look. That goal goes beyond just generating social capital, but there you go. So, in a more sophisticated way, games can provide a simple model of society where the player embodies a character that either begins with a great deal of social capital or has the potential to gain it, i.e. the prince who must defend his kingdom, or the poor farmer who's destined to become a great hero, or in this case the art student who's destined to unite two worlds, or the scientist who's destined to set right the consequences of his actions. So that's one way, this is one way we transfer social capital in games. We let the player inhabit and control a character that we as the designers invest with social capital in the context of the game world. The second way is through teaching systems that are used in modern society to access social capital. This is about making gameplay out of understanding how our cities work, or implementing economic systems for the player to interact with, or modeling trade and organizational structure. And of course, these games do that, but to a greater or lesser degree, the interfaces that they provide to that gameplay, or to those gameplay systems, are at least as forbidding and difficult as those systems in the real world. Try making money in use sometime. So, I would propose that through careful design, we can take advantage of the nature of games as engines of social capital. If we increase the player's emotional attachment to the characters in our games, then we help players transfer the social capital that we invest in those characters to themselves. If we increase their emotional investment in the world of our games, then we give them a more meaningful world in which to practice and explore, so that the actions that they take there will better transfer to the physical world. And when we model literal systems in the world, we should tie those systems to the primary gameplay elements and to the theme and premise of our games. If we make systems, so this slide is of an article which is a parody. It talks about how you should be a real-life video game hero, and it doesn't talk about systems of status or social capital. It talks about how you should really, always make sure you break the pots whenever you go into a shop. So clearly we have some work to do. If we make the systems that we simulate in our games behave in ways that literally or symbolically reflect the systems in the real world, the lessons that our games teach will apply to the world our players live in and potentially transform it as well. Okay, so that's the image is from a Game Informer article. So these are bad examples of how you might try to transfer social capital, or fail to try to do that. Another note, the transfer to social capital, or any skill learned in a game to the real world. It's really hard to manage. It's harder than it seems like it should be, and there's a lot of researchers who are looking into that, trying to figure out how and why it's hard, and how to do it better. As they provide answers, as those studies become available, we need to be really careful about how we use those things, what messages we're giving. So I want to talk a little bit about how these ideas specifically apply to our industry. Nothing I'm saying here is absolute, and I'm not talking about you or about your game. I know that we're all doing we're all making games or studying games or playing games because we love them and we care passionately about them. So, I'm not talking about creating educational games per se or creating games for change. Those things are great ideas and they have a lot of benefits. I'm talking about embedding these kind of systems into all of our games. Not so that any one game is some complete transforming, empowering juggernaut, but so that the aggregate weight of all the games that someone plays over their lifetime makes their life better. And so that the weight of all of the lives of all gamers make the world better. All of our games have an agenda. Sometimes it's our agenda. It's something we put into the game on purpose. It might be subtle or it might be heavy-handed, but it's intentional. Sometimes we don't think our games have an agenda. We're wrong. It probably just means that the agenda is being created by our assumptions and by the things influencing us. The trick, of course, is that it's going to affect players either way. So what should our agendas be? I'm not even going to touch that. But I would like it to be a discussion that becomes part of every game's design process. So here's the inflammatory comment that the previous slides have been foreshadowing. Saying that games can have a deep, pervasive, unconscious effect on players' lives and improve them, it problematizes denying that sexism, violence, racism in games can have a negative effect. So, does Call of Duty make people go on shooting rampages? I don't think so. Does Street Fighter cause rampant stripe fighting in the streets? Well, no. Do MOBAs cause bands of players to run all over town tearing towers down? I don't think so. But do players from these genres make up some of the most toxic online communities on the internet? Oh, yeah. I'm in no way implying a causal relationship here. But it's an interesting observation, and something that should be looked at closely and objectively. So that brings us back to the beginning. Racism, sexism, class, privilege. These things are in our games. Not all of our games, and sometimes intentionally and to good purpose. But many times not. Why? If games are engines of social capital, then we have the potential to use them to change the world for the better. And we're responsible for it if we don't. So that is the talk portion of this talk. And I actually made it through in 16 minutes, not 20, so that's pretty awesome. I would like to take questions for a few minutes and then get on to sort of the interactive portion of this. Yeah?
You had a slide with people doing cosplay, and you said, let's see, you said that was a bad example of transferring social capital out of games. Why is that a bad example?
Yeah. Well, I mean, enjoying the game and expressing your fandom is there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, right? Like conventions and, I mean, in a sense, if that's interacting with the community and enjoying yourself, then that's positive socialization, and that's great. But if you were looking at, so we're going to put an auction house into World of Warcraft, and we're going to model systems of trade, and we're going to teach people how economics in the world work through the course of our game. And what people take away from the game is that it's fun to dress like an elf. Then you haven't succeeded in getting the message that you were intending to across. Like you've got something across, but it was that your elves look really awesome and it's fun to play them and to express your fandom in that way. So it's an issue of lots of things are conveyed. What are you trying to focus on, and how are you trying to transfer those specific ideas in your game?
Yeah, this is a question about like the war game, like military shooters, and of course there's other evidence that military shooters don't get people to go out in the street to take decoys evidence and shoot down every person they see.
Sure.
What it does is that one of the things that the developers of COD are trying to do is go for accuracy, and that also means looking at talking to people in the military for their experiences, and as part of the shift between older and army today. In one case, do the newer role players paint a more positive portrayal of the war experience based upon like advertising or like the America's Army games that were like literally sponsored by the US military, a like good picture of like, yeah, being a giant military interventionist is so cool and awesome versus war was really hard and bad and not great. That's something that can be done.
Absolutely, and so the question is, I mean, that I would love to sit down with some of the Call of Duty developers and say, what is the message you're trying to get across? Like, what are you trying to convey by the existence of this game? I don't argue that the game should exist. I mean, it's fun to play. But what exactly are you trying to say? What's the message? You look at a military shooter like Spec Ops: The Line, and it very clearly has a message, right? It's very clearly setting you up and knocking you down and trying to, I mean, it's Heart of Darkness, right? Apocalypse Now. It's setting up that storyline and exposing you to the horrors of war, leading you down the path to committing atrocity and then calling you on it. And so it's doing something very intentional. There were scenes in some of the Call of Duty games that were really sort of doing a similar thing. By and large, though, I don't from playing them get that sense. Yes, they're in some ways they're trying to be accurate in terms of what equipment they're representing. Some games, the America's Army ones, are trying to be accurate in terms of what you'd be expected to do, what kind of training you might look forward to in the military. And to some degree, they're probably effective in conveying those things. And that's fine. If the developers were thinking about that and that's the game that they've made, then I don't question its right to exist. I wish there was more transparency in what a developer's agenda for a particular game was, so that I, as a consumer, could have some idea of how they're trying to influence me, but that's kind of wishful thinking.
I mean, that's a difficult thing with the airport scene in Call of Duty, right? It's the goal of that scene is to horrify the player.
Sure.
But what's the purpose of horrifying the player? It's
right.
You get out of that scene, you're like, I was successfully horrified. Now what?
Sure. I mean, does it make you, decide that kind of violence is bad? Does it make you question the totalitarian elements in government? Like, those are sort of the higher level goals that need to be behind it. Like, we're striving for military accuracy is not a high level goal. Like, we're trying to make people understand the situation that soldiers are in and the difficult choices they face. Okay, that's reasonable. But that's the kind of thinking that I'm looking for in these situations.
So where does the agenda or the goal of our company wants to ship this game, we want to do something edgy, really edgy, say like the airport scene, but our goal is to make money? Where does that fit into it? Because really, I think for the most part, that's probably the agenda of most companies. They're not thinking of either changing the world, and they won't, like you said.
Right.
But where does that fit in with the whole social capital?
So my perspective is that I'm not here to talk to companies, and I don't think that trying to give this talk to a bunch of CEOs would be terribly effective. Or to a bunch of shareholders in a company who don't really understand what the company does but are looking for dividends. I'm here to give this talk to developers and try to raise awareness, because even if you work for a company whose goal is the bottom line, all of the designs of the game are implemented by developers. And you can, as a low-level coder or artist, you can think about those things. You can ask your boss about them and demand answers. You may not get them, and then you have to decide: is that is my goal to make money and feed my family, or is my goal to make games that I'm proud of? And that's a hard choice,
I think a more important question is how do the ideas that are conveyed in games, how does that reflect on the culture of those who play and those who develop? How does that reflect on them? Because it's my observation, it's my understanding that companies that have more open-minded managers and policies have better functioning environments for their workers and tend to produce better games than those who have, for example, have like a really macho culture and have like crunch all the time. And these are problems that among developers, these are questions that are being asked amongst them, but it's not really hitting the higher echelons of particularly these larger companies. And I think as developers start asking those questions among themselves, it's going to be heard and it's going to be understood. And and what needs to happen from here is, what are the answers to these questions? How do we make better environments for ourselves as developers to make better games and have better messages in our games?
Yep, I think that there's two things there I would comment on. One is that the game development industry, in terms of the environment that a lot of us exist in for creating games, is maybe less than optimal. The constant drive to release and constantly recurring crunch, not having space in that development cycle to lift your head up and think about what you're being asked to produce or what you're designing even, right? That is a big and ongoing problem, absolutely. And the other thing is that, so this comes from two sides. The sociologist in me, the person who planned to graduate from college and become a pure academic and study all of this, wants to look at game companies and look at all the games that exist as artifacts that reflect back on the society that produced them. And then as a game designer, you're coming at it from the other side and saying, all right, I'm about to produce these things. What am I trying to create with them? And I think that the things that are produced need to be and can be looked at from both perspectives. So I'm going to pose my first interactive question now, give you guys a minute to think about it while I take another question, and then we'll get on to that. For those of you who are independent game developers out there who are working on games, I'd like to call on a couple of you to talk about how these ideas, either which you may have already had and think about every day, or which may just be occurring to you, how those apply to your games and how things you could do in your game that would implement these ideas and either make the game better or help the game make the world better. So, question first.
I'm curious, as a developer, what you think would be positive systems to pursue integrating into newer games going forward.
So it depends on what, the world's a complicated place. No
Yes.
game is going to address all of these issues, right? So if you're looking at a game and you're planning to implement a system, like you're saying, all right, so we're going to have currency in our game. Say it's a role-playing game. We're going to have currency. All right, if you're implementing this game system, what is that going to teach the players? Am I going to make that system and their practice of using that system analogous to real-world financial systems, or am I going to make it something that is going to be misleading? If money is constantly available and it's never in shortage, and you don't have to work for it, or the ways that you get it aren't related to the things that you're doing, then you're not accurately conveying that system. And that's fine, that may be a choice you make, but you should be making it as a choice. If you're implementing a free-to-play game and you're designing pinch levels in which players have to step outside of the system of the game to spend their real-life money to alter the rules of the game to their advantage, what is that system teaching? And I don't necessarily know the answer to that question, right? But I wonder how many people who are going, ooh, pinch levels are the best way to monetize microtransactions, I'm going to put them in my game. I wonder how many of them are thinking about what that's actually saying to players.
Okay.
And, again, I don't necessarily know the answer. Yeah?
I'm going to try to phrase this carefully. There are people, both in society and in the game industry, who currently benefit from systems outside of games and sort of a common systems that exist within games. These are people who currently have kind of control on doing all their existing sorts of handle and benefit from it.
Absolutely.
And they will probably be disadvantaged or slightly or feel benefit in interrogating these systems, or thinking terribly hard about the agenda because the agenda currently serves them.
Sure, right. If you're acting from a position of privilege, why is it a benefit to you to try to alter the systems that are benefiting you?
Right.
And I guess I would say, first of all, I would like to think that we're people of conscience. I'd like to think that we try to look at the world, or can try to look at the world, and see things that are wrong with it, and use the tools that are at our disposal to make it better. So we're game developers, so that's using our games to make the world better. Obviously the world's the way it is because privilege perpetuates itself. And I hope that, why would you do something that doesn't benefit you? Well, maybe because you went to a talk at a conference and went, yeah, wait a minute, that's the right thing to do. That has to be a personal choice, but, if it's one that you believe in, then this is the kind of message that, that you feel compelled to get up in front of a classroom full of people and advocate for. So, all right, so I would like to call on a couple of people who are indie developers to answer my first question, and then we'll do more questions. So anybody developing a game and thinking about these issues? Yep.
It's not a very big game, but we have a goal to have our creative team be a diverse amount of people, specifically with male and female, or just gender diversity, so that we don't just have another game that takes all these, straight male assumptions in its design and perpetuates sexist ideas that we might not even realize are sexist. But
Thank you.
That's huge, right? Just seeing role models, seeing people who are like you in games. It's it's ridiculous, the gender and racial split in games.
Going with that too, the idea, especially I find in a lot of AAA games, the idea that unfortunately if you have a character with a woman, she often gets pigeonholed as like the mother or the captured princess. I think it's kind of important to be able to step away from that and say, well, is being a man my defining characteristic? Is that the only thing that defines me, or is it just part of who I am and I'm this whole other person behind it?
Yep.
I think it's important to step away from I'm the damsel in distress, or I'm the mother, or I'm the love interest, or whatever, and move beyond that and really develop the female character as like a whole person, not just some one-dimensional thing.
Yep. And that's, we can all, as game developers, whatever our personal backgrounds, race, gender, economic background, there's a lot of research out there on these issues, right? Something accessible if, problematic in its own ways. Anita Sarkeesian's, Women versus Tropes in Video Games does a really good job of pointing out sort of the current state of affairs. Not necessarily at this point suggesting solutions, but being aware of those things can help us question our own assumptions, because, otherwise why would you even think of it? Because you are what you are, There's no value judgment on that.
So, kind of speaking from the opposite spectrum of the last two, my team is 4 guys. So this is our first game. We're all either in college or just out of college, so we don't, I personally would like to have a diverse team right now in our set of organic development. It's not something that we can, not that we can't have a diverse team, it's that we have the team that we have. We can't add 4 more people who are women just to have an even balance. And so the challenge then becomes, in our game and in our content, how do we think about the messages that we have in our game without having it too heavily biased?
Testing.
Sure.
Testing.
Focus testing.
Testing.
Focus groups. Run it
Testing,
by
getting
everyone
the
else.
opinion of people who have different perspectives you know, as you go forward with production and you look to grow your team, make the active choice to look for diverse perspectives to bring into your team. You know, certainly when you're putting together a small volunteer indie company in college, and the unfortunate state is that you're surrounded by a bunch of other white guys in your college, you know, you can feel somewhat constrained by that. But, you know, that's changing. And that's hopefully something that by making games that represent the world a bit more accurately than our current ones do, we can encourage.
What was the premise of this section?
The premise of this section was if you're working on an indie game, given the ideas that I brought up in this talk, how do those apply to your game? What kind of things are you doing that align with those? So,
I have a suggestion, which is broaden your input to different insights from different people. I found that the lowest friction way to start listening to different kinds of podcasts, actually. So, Isometric Show does a really good job covering women and in the industry from multiple parts of the industry.
Yep.
Spawn on Me is a good podcast when it comes to diversity, injustice points for social justice and more general topics in social justice. And then after that, you go to Twitter feeds, then you read up the articles that they cite, you know, just having the people who are not you do readings of product out there can give you a lot of insight on how your game can be interpreted and maybe give you some insight on how your game operates that you might not possibly want.
Absolutely, and you know, if you are a small student team, you know, if you're on a college campus, you know, there's an ethnic studies department or a women's studies department. Go talk to the professor. Say, hey, we're making a game, and you know, we're curious about what kind of assumptions we might be making in it. Are you or is anyone in one of your classes interested in taking a look at that and giving us their opinion? You may or may not like the results, but you know, the resources are there. All right, one more.
Yeah, so I guess in our game we're really trying, I'm working with a small team, but sort of our core theme is really trying to address some of those issues. In particular, we're trying to sort of explore how kind of the expectations you have of other people really affect other people, and how, if you're another person, how the expectations people have of you really affect you, which I think applies to things like race and gender. So we're sort of doing our best to not necessarily overtly have a message, but to withstand kind of a reading from the perspective of race or gender.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to switch over. I'll take your question, but or comment, but I'm going to switch over to the opposite perspective. Any indies or people who work for a company where you think, you know, the game that you're making, these ideas don't really apply to, or that you have, you know, that you think that they're irrelevant. I don't just want to ask for people to agree with me. I've said a bunch of stuff out there, and some of it is, you know, clearly my opinion. So I'm interested in people who have the other perspective as well. But I'll take your question first.
I had a few things queued up, so I'm going to try to speak efficiently.
Sure, sure.
To I think his statement earlier, I want to say that for any CEOs in the room, I think it makes it a good pragmatic idea to want to control the message of game sense positively, because the game shapes the demographic, and shaping that demographic positively can make that same demographic easier to target for the same business with future products, as well as help society, which makes it a dual win.
Yep.
Second thought. I think it was his statement earlier, and I didn't get the whole thing, but I said additionally, if it's something that you believe in, like altruism, then you should find a way to include it and link it to something that benefits you. So if it's really important, then find a way. The other thing is, your latest section was about your independent game developers and how you were including stuff and being mindful how it would change society, whatever. I'm sorry,
Good
one of the things that I was thinking about, because I have a lot of ideas that I intend to put into a game when I have a chance. One of them was like showing things from both perspectives, not necessarily having good and evil, but having opposing perspectives, just showing from both sides what psychological processes they went through when they're trying to figure things out and how it comes to, what's that word, climax?
Sure.
The other thing was, oh no, show the story from both perspectives. The third one was, I really like this idea. It was in maybe more ordinary games, having more choices of romantic influence for the people involved in it. Like I just like this feature that, like in a simple fighting game involving like, the story progresses in a different way, and depending on how the story goes and what choices the player personally makes determines what, I guess, the sex of the romantic partner and how that story progresses as they go on. It's difficult, it's not difficult to explain, but it's...
I mean, a number of games will provide you with a choice in the game of what your romantic partner is going to be. It would be sort of interesting to reverse that and have other choices you make in the game be what causes that romantic involvement to happen, and take that direct choice out of your hands. I think that would be interesting. Yes?
Quick bouncing off of that, some of the concepts that you just explained can be seen in some of the mechanics of Silent Hill 2. In like little things that you don't even really notice that you're doing, like how many health packs you're using and whether or not you're defeating the monsters affects the story. So bouncing off of that idea, you know, what quests you do and like even maybe how you defeat your enemies or something like that might determine, you know, your relationships with the other characters.
Yeah, I mean, Silent Hill 2 was a game that was way ahead of its time and did a lot of really subtle, interesting things.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So speaking to your second question, I work for a Fortune 1000 company. We have 18,000 employees. So in my capacity, I work as a designer, and it's very difficult to, it's a company that's full of red tape, all about the bottom line, and it's impossible to say like, oh, but I have a mission I want to accomplish. And I find that in my role as being, and I'm sure many people in this room can relate to, if you're not, I am the CEO, I'm the head of this game, but if you are a designer, if you're an art director, if you're a programmer, I find that there are always opportunities to combat and reverse and avoid microaggressions that, you know, I think many women, many people of color can relate to the idea that what really, you know, tears you down every day is not the big things, it's the small things that happen every single day. It's getting catcalled, it's, you know, having people make assumptions about you based on your skin color or, you know, whatever. So if I'm choosing imagery that is supposed to appeal to, say, CEOs, I'm often pushed by people like, oh no, these are all CEOs, like, get, you know, pictures of guys in business suits, you know. And I actively, like, I'm like, how about a black woman in a suit? What's wrong with that? So instead of like, you're not always in a position to say, no, I really want to push forward a message of social justice, but you can always find ways in whatever your job capacity is, you can find ways to avoid assumptions, microaggressions, things that just pile up over time.
Absolutely. I mean, I work for a pretty large company too and can't affect the top level decisions. I try to do what I can in the design decisions that I have to be, you know, ethically acceptable to myself. And I cultivate relationships with the people who are a step up. You know, the writer who is coming up with the storylines for the levels that we're generating. I might not be able to dictate those, but I can be on friendly terms with him, and when he, you know, unthinkingly writes a plot line that's really problematic, I can go and ask him about it. And you know, maybe it's too late to change that, but asking him about it maybe next time makes him think a little bit more. So, you know, if enough of us, you know, have this agenda, and sometimes we can be open about it and sometimes we can't, you know, then the system can be changed because we're the people making the games, right? Yeah.
I mean, is it a good thing that the bar is pretty low?
There's some pretty egregious things out there. And I mean, is it a good thing? Well, no, right? It's terrible. But at the same time, you know, does it mean that we can see an effect, or we can affect a change? You know, yeah. And possibly being able to produce visible momentum is something that we can leverage to keep things moving in that direction. So maybe it gives us more leverage to move things faster in the long term. I don't know.
I hope so.
But as gaming is maturing, both the developers are getting older, and the people who played games have been exposed to them for a long time and grown up, and are demanding more sophisticated, nuanced games. We're sort of recognizing how bad things are in some ways, and not across the board, right? And even games that are problematic have great things going for them. So I have 2 minutes left, so let's see if we can get 2 more questions in.
Okay, one of the things that's also talking about basically change companies as a consumer get not they get angry or tell them, or they just stop buying, or they because of the biggest things is that if the company only cares about the bottom line, the thing is if there's a change in the bottom line, if the same games that they come out here deal aren't selling, they're gonna have to figure out new ways to keep up, keep getting profits and keep getting up, and that's
absolutely. Companies do respond to that kind of thing. I mean, the problem, of course, is that your Call of Duty is the biggest seller, right, at the moment, and there's a lot of economic momentum going in that direction, and that's a really hard train to alter its course.
They could also just say like nobody likes ghosts. That's all.
Sometimes people make arbitrary decisions.
Call of Duty's like last big, maybe I'm thinking of one of the other fighting shooter games, but there was a trailer recently that had Kevin Spacey in it, and it definitely questioned like nation building and using the military to pursue profits. Like, why are you beating up on that title? When that's what they were doing, they were questioning the GW policy. Why beat up on that?
Mostly because it's the largest, right? And it's not always, everything it does isn't bad. And every message it has isn't bad. I'm not saying that. Looking at the series as a whole, there are a number of really powerful scenes in it that delivered really strong messages. At the same time, did those messages go over the heads of a lot of the people playing the game? Were those messages legitimately the purpose of the game?
I got it. Like,
and I don't know.
By the end, and a lot of money has been spent to pursue this war, and we have learned that Soap's a good guy, but then he dies. So we get out of it that war might actually consume good people. I don't know that it's necessarily all that. You know what I mean?
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, so we are out of time.